I want to talk about what happened, but before that, there's something about weekly magazine that I looked at. Celebrity walk around public, photographer take their picture and print it. I always wonder how that's allowed. It's kinda gray area, but why is it allowed? Even for celebrity from privacy point of view, it's problem by law. It's completely allowed, but apparently for celebrity scandals, there's special rules that said people need to know about it, so it becomes okay. When I heard that, I laughed a little. Cause what's this magazine? Who got divorced? Who cheated on their partner? People need to know that, and so it's allowed, even though it breaks privacy law. That made me laugh. So let's talk about today. When I listen to podcast, I see that yearly analytics that Spotify shows, and when I hear how much other shows have grown, I feel sad that these people even reached what I started with, and that makes me feel sad. Normally, when someone feels bad like that, and they get jealous, they quit, or they stop caring for me. It's not any of those. It's just uncomfortable, nothing more, nothing less, but I keep going anyway. My life is the same way. It's hard to live, but I live normally. That's different, right? It's hard, but there's hope. I'm not like that. I'm not hurt and giving up either. For me, it's hard, but I live. I don't think this comes across no matter how many times I say it's normally. People hold and some kind of hope, right? It's hard. But if I keep living, something good might happen. And there's some kind of value placed on saying alive, even if it's hard. I don't know who there's value or not. For me, life is hard, and I live anyway. And this is same since I was born. Next thing, and there's a person I know, and today when I saw her, I thought she looked pretty. Before, my first impression of her was about books. I noticed she was pretty as direct visual information, but later I heard where she was from, and that became an explanation that got added on top, and it moved up importance more than the visual impression. Being pretty is a fuzzy idea, but the hometown isn't fuzzy. No, it took over as a bigger impression. The power of assumptions is scary. I hadn't heard well. She was from I would just start to see it was pretty and left it's that I wonder if hearing seeds from Hokkaido adds that kind of layer on top. That's how gaps form. Like when someone has a sudden job where a different personality than expected. That's good example of information getting layer on top. First impression. Also today I was watching a street musician. The reason there's a song called the scary song that I saw at the school festival yesterday. Music become something like addiction for me. I'm tired and I know in my head I should stop, but I keep listening anyway. It's exactly like an addiction. Maybe it's like people with alcohol addiction. They don't want to drink, but their body makes them drink anyway. So today I was watching street musician and singer often look in each other's eye during songs. There are different reasons for that. People watching think that eye contact gives some kind of excited feeling, but I find myself thinking, how do people get a happy feeling from something so obviously staged? It makes me feel embarrassed instead. Apparently, singers do it partly because performing in front of a crowd makes them anxious, and eye contact calms that down. But even so, it looks staged to me, like they picked the exact moment to do it. That's fine, but while I was watching today, a woman walked up close and she looked like she might be in love with the way she was watching. Afterward, the two singers kept performing normally like nothing happened. I watched them and thought, how can these people stay so calm? I end up thinking about pointless stuff like that, and I wish I could stop because it stopped me from just watching normally. I watched a few videos of the scare song around school festival, and most performers don't make eye contact. Their student, and it's embarrassing, but there's one pair who kept looking at each other the whole time, and I thought that was nice. Also, I bet people who sing well get approached by people who are interested in them romantically afterward, but if they duet with someone, people might assume the two of them are a couple, which could work against. And then this next part might sound pointless, but ever since preschool and elementary school, my interest never matched the point around me. The only anime I watched was Dragon Ball, and even that didn't match what other people around me like. Actually, let me tell this part to my taste. Music tend to match people older than me. But strangely, it doesn't match the generation just one step above me. Even older generation must be better. That strange pattern I can't fully explain, but I clearly connect with much older people. Not people my own age, not even people from my parents' generation exactly. That would make sense, but this is different. It's bothered me because I can't explain it. It's not like I have a sibling 10 years older than me or anything like that. Anyway, I liked Dragon Ball, but it still didn't make with other kids because the generation gap today. I watched the video of street performance of Beatles song, and it's make me think Japanese culture doesn't succeed globally in most cases. And honestly, I don't know how many people around the world can even praise Japan. Some people think of it as part of China, but there are Japanese song, anime, entertainment that do succeed worldwide, not on the level of the Beatles, but for example, Dragon Ball, talk bands that don't get that kind of reach, but Dragon Ball that so who isn't it the top anime in Japan itself? Maybe it's not something people watch in daily anymore, or it's not currently airing. There could be a lot of reason, but worldwide, it's at the top. Whatever the reason, it just looks like Japanese people go against the grain. I went through a hard time with this, not knowing who it was actually popular, since I never matched other people's taste. Taste. Everyone likes Piece, Naruto, Pokemon. That's still true today. So around when I graduated high school, movies started coming out for those who challenges, but I don't know what's going on with kids today, so I can't say much about that. Next, there's a anchor singer who's a big name, a star, and that's Gen. When I watched him on TV show, he seemed like a genuinely kind person. Even toward younger people, I noticed that kind of things easily, and to me, he comes across as a good person every time he's on TV, but even he got a problem was disappear from TV while no matter how great or respectable someone's there but fraud, that's what makes some humans who somehow were completely perfect model person they wouldn't feel human, and thinking about that makes me feel lonely again. I'm not saying whether I'm that kind of model person myself. This is just about how it feels. It always makes me feel endlessly lonely when this happened. Someone I thought I could relate to get pushed away again. The Dragon Ball story earlier connect to this too. It's a good example watching Dragon Ball happen back in preschool a long time ago, but it's still like a wound for me. It's still like a wound for me. I only have painful memory tied to me. It next I tend to focus everything around the future if I do something now. I worry it might turn out to be useless, or and that it won't read anywhere. So I can't fully get through myself in the present moment. For example, if I were doing a street performance and only a few people in front of me were listening, I can't just think that's enough. I end up thinking, would this doesn't turn in a song lyrics something bigger, right? It makes nothing because it became something big that the people would hear it, but who's some only 5 people hear it now. It feels meaningless to me. That's been true since my blogging days, and it's the same with podcasting, writing an article, recording something, upgrading up a stock of work, and only being able to think about people listening to it rare later. That way of thinking has caused me to fail over and over. Basically, I'm the opposite of someone who lives in a moment. I should be a little more present, focused, or maybe even more present, focused than that would be fine. I shouldn't think this hard about blogging or podcasting. I should focus on people listening now and not worry too much about only material, but the uncertainty of the future feels too big, so present action feels almost worthless to me. I try to predict the future in too much detail, and I can't actually predict predict it. So I can't judge what will become lyrics or not, and that makes everything in the present feel wasted, and and I freeze up completely. I can't start anything. Starting something without thinking about the future around feels irresponsible to me, irresponsible toward myself. That's why even in high school, I feel I have had to decide between science and humanities tracks, choose a path, decide on material to study, use specific reference books. I couldn't just start without deciding whether I was a science or a humanities person. I should have thought about the future and lower way moved forward anyway. Even with podcasting, I felt that same lonely feeling over and over. Even something as small as writing the show description today, the show name cover art finally got decided, and I thought I'd finally start, but then I realized the method I used before I wasn't good enough, even though I had a lot of good idea. I already sensed something was off, but the approach today felt like I got mentally pushed down further than I've ever been. This kind of lonely feeling doesn't depend on whether something is big or small. Everything pushed me down the same way. For example, saying the name of the celebrity or artist I dislike and news or online doesn't just make me feel bad. It makes me feel lonely because I think everyone probably likes this person, so nobody will understand why I don't. Everyone else likes them, and I feel isolated, believing no one else feels the way I do, and that makes the lonely feeling strongly. I tend to observe everything around me too much, and I feel out of sync with people around me, like something's off, and that sense of being off feels especially strong, and I know I'm sensitive to sound too. When the lonely feelings get strong, people might explain it by saying I'm mistaking myself for out- outlier when there's a middle ground that people who feel the same way. But in my case, my likes and dislikes are too extreme. Maybe that's real true. Japanese people as a whole tend to be extreme too. Everyone says they love this not that's there's also a quiet majority who don't say much. For example, that group called Pump Up Chicken and even accidentally almost playing one of their songs it gives me goosebumps. Would they show up on music show? I skip it right away, but I doubt anyone would understand that. It even takes courage for me to say this here. Who I said, I don't get why bumper chicken is good. People would tell me that's strange. A lot of people would say that if I said it. And that's the hard part. It goes in both way kind of problem. For example, if someone criticizes lyrics that I love, I'd probably feel the same kind of reaction, but it's for the other way around. Someone hates the lyrics a lot. I might end up sympath- sympathizing with sympath- sympath- sympathizing with their side instead when it comes to lyrics I dislike. I can't explain what's bothering me so much. The way they're overrated and there's nothing about the voice or the mood that I can find to as good. I know this feeling won't be understood by other people, and that's where the lonely feeling comes from. But if someone told me that's just how it is, the more that would be true to people who like the lyrics to say, of course you feel that way, asking them to understand exactly how much I dislike it isn't realistic, and that's part of loneliness too. Some people might say the answer is to open up and try that meet the general public halfway, but here's one thing I could say. Normally people just like dislike lyrics on a simple level. I end up analyzing the voice, expression, atmosphere, performance style, and cultural context, all of it. One last thing about this, what I wanna get across here is how but the lyrics I dislike actually me. It's how strong this lonely feeling is. I just that feelings feeling feeling uh, loneliness to come through, and I want people to understand that this isn't something that gets fixed just by opening up. And that's kind of just open your heart. You work out ideas, basically a fantasy story. I've started calling that kind of things fantasy, disliking something area people don't usually talk about. So when I meet someone who dislikes the same thing I do, I feel a strong connection, even if the reasons are different, but strongly even when someone likes the exact same things I like, and that doesn't create the same kind of connection. Next thing, when someone influence the singer I like, sometimes I also like that other singer, sometimes I don't. That's strange thing too. Next, some genuinely smart people with high test scores like suffered animals. I found that surprising yesterday. Someone smart who likes stuff doll character. I forget that name. It made me wonder who intelligence and the kind of hobbies people have that don't match their age are separate tracks. There's some connection, but maybe they're separate system too. There are definitely smart people who are trained, but I need actual data to know. So sure. What I've thought so far is that smart people get tired of complicated things, so they end up liking simple things, and because they're smart, they end up liking their brain one rather than caring how it looks socially. That's an interesting way to look at it. One perspective, anyway. I was about to humbly compare myself, saying something like, "I'm not smart, so," but honestly, I don't fit clearly in either type, and that gave me that lonely feeling again. I can't say I match this type or that type either way. Moving on, what I look in a background of a singer I like, sometimes I like everyone who influenced them, and sometimes it's the opposite that I like singer, but I dislike everyone who influenced them. Today I looked in one singer's influence, and I didn't like most of them at all, and I wonder how they made such good music from that influence. So it seems like someone's background, and the only part of who they are, there's also a comedy duo, Bannerman, and one comedian who was influenced by them. I dislike the comedian, and I can't understand how being influenced by Bannerman led to becoming like that. Even if I like a song, it doesn't mean I like everything about it. Sometimes I get curious about certain songs and I end up looking them up on every version. So street performance and plant video, wedding, reception, school festival, more street performance, TV appearance, karaoke competition, all kind of version. It's the same thing with anxious feelings, and it happens the same way with excited feelings too. Speaking of anxious feeling, yesterday I put my hand in my underwear again while writing something, and afterward I told myself I then touched the blanket since I used my right hand and then touched my leg afterwards. So the chance of contamination there's Hi. Also, and and I and I also went to the bathroom the first time I woke up. So that spot isn't that dirty. I list out reason like this to convince myself things are okay. I've always wondered about this, why I always end up disliking today's music. It's not like that from people who aren't students anymore, right? Students dig deeper music and explore a love song, but if I say students have more reason that it sounds like I'm saying students have free time, and that's not true. New students are busy and delinquent are busy fighting. Music during youth is supposed to be a way for people to express who they're. But if that's true, why does everyone in Japan end up listening to the exact same music without expressing anything different? It's about expression. People should end up with more different alternative taste, but everyone listens to the same stuff. I get it. What people want isn't self-expression. It's being understood by their peer. Of course, there's also a desire for approval mixed in. But even that desire for approval might be different for me compared to other people. That's a basic human drive. But even that might be something I experience differently. I'm not sure. But everyone wanna secure their own position, and if that's true, people should end up being more individual, right? But the stronger someone's individual is, and the harder it is for others to understand them. So their position becomes less stable. So the kind of individually people now shaped a lot by how others will see them in a way, and it's turned everyone compares giving similar forms of self-expression, but I always wonder why everyone handles together in a minority direction, going off the main push path, but still forming a crowd there. What I talk about today comes down to this. For RS expressions, the same as it is for me, what matters most, projecting the shape of your inner self outward, not necessarily being understood. I'm the same way at karaoke, whether other people understand what I'm doing doesn't matter to me at all. That's kind of out of step with most people who had some kind of talent, art, music, acting, writing, anything. My life would be richer. Instead, I'm just at a step with things. The strangest part is that even this podcast is nothing more than me being at a step with people next. Ichiro and other athletes often have strong routine, and that same pattern shows up in people with developmental difference or depression too. This kind of fixed pattern can be even happen in animals, and one animals experiment feeling that chimpanzee in the same spot every day made its develop the same repeats behavior that connect to the things like obsessive compulsive pattern to, and I find this interesting topic. Having a routine makes it clear who I'm, what kind of person I'm. It creates a clear boundary between me and the outside world. I've experienced that myself, and based on that experience, I can say this, that feeling is faded a lot now, but when I was living strictly by routine, that feeling was strong. But there's the Buddhism idea, no self, the idea that there's no fixed self, so no fixed entity that is me. I thought that might conflict with making the self solid and clear through routine. Doesn't that seem contradictory? Trying to form up your trying to build a solid sense of sense. I wonder if that could even work logically. The idea of no self says there's no fixed self. It's changed depending on condition. There's no fixed entity you can call a follow that idea naturally. That fixed sense of self should dissolve on its own. So maybe having routines kind of supports system for living within and that kind idea of no self. Maybe it's the very human thing to do. Since nothing stays fixed naturally, people create fixed point artificially because that I've been able to maintain a kind of support system for myself. I think I mentioned this before, but I meant back was doing this keeps me at least able to function and stay alive on a basic level. That's kind of fixed structure, that's part of it. But also having that routine means I stop being a bug, defined presence. It let me feel like I exist here, but think about it. I originally thought this was about strengthening the sense of self, but even monks live by strict routine too. Would we go with the idea of no self, then there's no self to strengthen in a first place. That idea doesn't even make sense. It's connected to impermanence, to everything change, and living a fixed point is a way to avoid getting swept away by that change. I once thought of it like avalanche coming down on me in the world, or the people around me keep changing while living inside that emptiness and voiding, getting swallowed by that avalanche. Change is very hard. Being inside the emptiness means your body and sense of grounding are already the thing. And so you become more vulnerable to outside influence. To protect against that, I need some kind of structural discipline as a backbone. It's connected to impermanence gain. Everything changes, so I need something that keeps me from getting swept away by that change. People often say someone has stronger ego, but that's just how it looks from outside. It's just how that person's expression comes accurate. Not the person is some fixed solid self underneath. Going back a bit, I thought this might conflict with Buddha's teaching of letting go of the self, but what Buddha meant wasn't reduce the self to zero. It was don't assume this is fixed permanent self, and so the idea of emptiness isn't but Saying something exists or doesn't exist is a different kind of concept altogether. Above the distinction, I don't fully get it, but it's not simply saying something exists or doesn't exist. By the way, I've lived without attaching myself permanently to anything. I left one religion and never fixed myself into another religion or another belief system. Instead, that's more something that used to happen to me than something I actively did. When I read about Buddhism, more specifically Buddha's teaching, I realized that even without being a monk, I've been living by almost the same principle, that fixing myself until anything, which is what I just talk about with kind of odd feeling. I said before that I create a boundary between myself and the world around me, but that doesn't mean strong thing that self. It means stabilizing the fluctuation of the self that connects to keeping the mind from swinging too much emotionally. What I was trying to think through for the short description, living emptiness with this feeling routines, what prevents that kind of explosive burst of energy, which is exactly what I've been saying all along. And it's all connected. It's Buddhism turns routines the tool for keeping the self from spiraling out of control. By the way, learning about Buddha's teaching, this is one part that I can accept as being based on the truth of the world. There's a lot of that, but it's also doesn't fully line with my own thinking. I shouldn't treat this as some final destination. And there's why I always feel real uncertain. There's no teaching that guarantees things will work out if I just believe in it. That's why this podcast will keep going with a sudden consistency and its basic stance, but there's always feeling like one puzzle piece is missing somewhere, and trying to fill that gap, create a new gap somewhere else. That might just be how it goes. Maybe that's what it means to be living person. And maybe that's fine, because there's no absolute answer anyway. I'm not searching for an answer, but I also don't settle anywhere. Believing there's no absolute, not settling itself the way of living for someone who believing there's no absolute. But doesn't that sound like it's also kind of searching? So maybe I'm protected by my own discipline, not as some kind of salvation, but by building temporary models, running temporary answers again and again. That's what keeps me from falling apart at the minimum level. This might be a big claim, but maybe what Buddha tried to do, move away from suffering was something like that too. Just trying to reduce suffering where possible. He couldn't erase all suffering, but maybe he was saying this approach helps reader, not some fixed ultimate truth, but searching for answer that act like solid footing to keep from falling apart. In a world of constant change, there's no real fixed answer. Since everything keeps changing, there's no fixed ultimate truth, but maybe it helps to carry a temporary answer for the moment. And maybe even Buddha's own followed turns Buddha himself in some kind of fixed truth, which might be exactly the thing Buddha was trying to avoid Buddha's teachings amazing, but strangely, maybe this is just how our brains are built. I thought it would be very abstract, but honestly, it feels more practical, something you can apply to small, concrete things in daily life. I rather than being some grand, universal, abstract idea, but at other times feels extremely abstract too. It's strange thing. Buddha's own teaching isn't absolute either, and it's not the correct answer. And even though it can look like a correct answer, I don't think it's the same as religion. Just a belief system that exists purely to be believed, and it doesn't feel quite like that either. Honestly, I know what I'm saying right now. The contradictory. I looked at different side dictionary and it seemed Buddha's core teaching that there's no fixed self, but some sources say the Buddha then proudly state that there's no such an entity at all. Some people argue that it's not just a few individuals saying this. It seems built on Buddhism teaching itself that you can't simply declare there's no entity. At this point, it sounds almost like a paradox that goes past what the human brain can grasp. But calling it a simple paradox and dismissing it feels wrong too. Because that my own approach is to not get too attached to this teaching either. Just take it rightly who I get to it, I'll end up making a whole drama out of it. It sounds harsh to call it a paradox, but honestly it seems close to something that human brain can't fully wrap around. So what does no fixed entities actually mean? I've been trying hard to figure this out on my own. My conclusions by definition. No self should mean there's no fixed entity, and that feels definitive to me. But the Buddhism say that's not quite right either. There's some entity from here. The explanation gets hard to follow. My interpretation that maybe it's meant something can't be explained. Terms of existing or not existing at all, but even this might have shifted a lot from what Buddha originally meant over to the other way. That's hard to say for sure. From what I found, it said Buddha described it as cannot be found, not as doesn't exist. He didn't say it doesn't exist. He said it can't be found. Then does that mean there's a chance it could be found? Apparently, that's not confirmed as a possibility either. So there's no chance of finding it. Doesn't that mean it doesn't exist? Then it becomes not a question of probability, but whether it's but probability isn't stated clearly either. Not holding it open as possible doesn't mean can't be found. It means it's not that kind of thing that can be found at all. But doesn't that basically mean the same as saying it doesn't exist? And there's no such thing as a fixed permanent entity. That much is clear. But entity by definition is supposed to mean something fixed. So shouldn't we just be able to say there's no entity at all? Dictionary Buddhist scholars and experts already say this. So no matter how much I try to reason through it logically, it feels like something beyond logical explanation. And honestly, maybe this is just philosophy at that point. Buddha's meaning were something anyone could clearly and simply understand, it would overshadow every other religion completely. That might even be possible. So maybe that's ambiguity is part of why Buddhism ended up splitting in so many different schools, because it can be interpreted in so many different ways. The deeper I think about this, the more I understand why over 2,000 years discipline and later religion leaders kept debating what Buddha actually meant, because it's hard to pin down. So some people say Buddha claims and there are no entity, while others say Buddha never said and there's no entity. It doesn't even seem like just one person's personal opinion that's how so many different school forms that matters. That is, and that's even if you trace back to Buddha himself, the original source, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll find the ultimate truth, but I still find myself believing that what Buddha said the right some level. Next thing, unlike people who get obsessively absorbed in one thing, like the typical otaku, I'm not like that. And I'm not wide shallow either. I just wanna do things differently. From other people, my range of interests usually narrow. My curiosity is fairly strong, but what I'm curious about is different from typical otaku interest, not anime trend, gadget, that kind of. I think the different type of otaku interest today. Subculture from as a fuzzy category, but from what I heard on a podcast, it's about immersing yourself, getting absorbed. No, that's word, but that definition, that's not me either. I don't get absorbed or immersed in a particular word like that. I'm also not interested in building up knowledge for its own sake, but I don't have something like a drive to gather knowledge, even though I try not to get too attached to sticking with no one thing. My interests are narrow, but I'm not someone who just follow trends either. I'd like to be able to claim some kind of identity like trend, and this just or something similar, but that never worked out for me. I'm not absorbed enough to claim that kind of identity. Who I were absorbed enough to claim that identity, I'd probably feel a strong sense of meaning attached to it, and if I felt that kind of meaning, it would overwhelm me completely. So my interest exists scattered around without full commitment to any of them. I'm not chasing trends either. My interests ignite quickly, but don't stay rich. That's the quick to each fine, quick to burn out type. So I end up mixing around different interests, but they never form a connected thread structure system. Interests just sit scattered around like that. I might be avoiding turning any of it's in my identity. I don't want any of it to override who I'm become me. As that drive to correct knowledge is not that gaining knowledge itself feeling satisfying. It's more like I'm consuming the things as intellectual stimulation, and knowledge just happen to build up a little along the way without me not noticing. If someone asked what's different between that and just following a trend? That's a hard question, because it's completely different. But trend following is about caring what other people think and feeling safe by going along with what's popular for me. It's interest coming from inside me, plus reacting to intellectual stimulation. I feel like I'm observing and taking part in the phenomenon of trend itself rather than following them. I can't and don't follow trend, but at the same time, I don't relate at all to people who just coldly look down mainstream things either. On this point, I guess I'm kinda close to being a contrarian in some way, but ultimately denying the mainstream doesn't mean anything either. Since that same thing denied today could become mainstream, itself the trend shift over time. It's the same with anime something that used to be a minority interest can become mainstream without nothing next, believing in that occult and thinking that path towards ruin. For example, worrying about being resented by someone and cults are worrying about occult type things and general believing something that doesn't exist and continuing to hold onto that belief even though it's not real in that way. I find that scarier than holding onto something that doesn't exist. Only I can convince myself that something isn't real. So only I can convince myself that something isn't real. So only I can get rid of that kind of theory. Otherwise, I can never escape that kind of suffering. I start multiply it like a kind of self-deprecating fiction, and I get swallowed by it. Also, believing something without evidence means there's no way to gather evidence and proving its superstition that it's not real. I just have to keep believing it since there's nothing to prove otherwise. Sure, someone who listens to me might feel a little relieved by imagining a curse, but believing a curse grudges are that kind of occult idea. Even outside of relationships with other people, even in strict religion terms, believing it can turn into something like obsessive compulsive behavior depending on the case. Obsessive compulsive disorder and at least recognize medical condition, but with occult belief only you can save yourself, not a doctor, not anyone else. But if no, you hire a medium who you can't trust the person, it's meaningless. And believing in a occult can push that kind of injury endlessly toward a path of ruin. Differently, religion can cause suffering to its similar way. Self censorship gets stronger, deciding I can't do that, this, or I can do that, and that's exactly what I went through myself. It's frightening, also thinking that's some kind of sign, and it's a message from God. There's something going to happen. There's something going to happen. Modern people don't usually feel that way, but once you start feeling that way, there's no end to it. Even something small can start to feel like a sign that's destroyed your judgment and completely. I think modern people would agree that's not very rational, and then people start saying their faith wasn't strong enough, and religion takes advantage of the gap to all kind of ways. There are so many paths toward ruin, mental effect to that kind of thing. Next, why do otaku interests tend to convert similar things? Who people are on a niche things, their interests should all be completely different, right? So why does everyone end up liking anime specifically? For anime, it's easy to dig deeper, and there's a huge community, and the more you dig, more comes out. But what I wonder about it's different. Maniac interests are supposed to be infinite, barely. Why does it always come down to cult, trend, insect, camera, math, military stuff? It's some kind of bias in what society treats as visible hobby categories. Even so, since there's category visible, Japanese people especially tend to gravitate towards the majority direction within the visible range, wanting to by part a group. So people go toward camera and Jesus, dinosaurs, and train whatever else other people are already doing. I think media accessibility also plays a role. How is it something is to consume through media in Japan? I feel like there aren't many math otaku. There might be some, but so that actually makes sense to me. But there are actually math otaku out there. I feel like there aren't many, and if there are so few, it doesn't create the kind of push where people try to dig deeper and it's easier. Next, who thinks I might find it interesting, I end up feeling too much meaning and them. It's like a meaning generating device inside me that's about to explode. So I feel like it's gonna become a big deal, and I can't even get started. The more attractive something is, the more I start digging in what makes it attractive, and that process I generate so much meaning that it becomes uncontrollable, or I realize it's not actually that attractive after all. I start what's attractive about it, can't fix it, but keep forcing myself to keep anyway. It gets pretty intense. It's not the type where I get super absorbed and hobby gets overly passionate and spend too much money. It's different from that. I feel too much meaning in it, and I can't put the brakes, especially because I wanna be different from other people. I get drawn to other that kind of niche appeal, almost like subculture stuff, but not quite. But I know that kind of things generate too much meaning for me. I'm trying to avoid it as much as possible. There's almost a rejection reaction that kicks in. I also end up rejecting meaning and the future too early, wondering if this hobby will keep going, wondering if it'll be useful for something down the road, and it's turned in something I don't want to fail at. The whole concept of failure gets scared, created in my mind. Normally, people just try something first, but for me, it's backward, meaning has to come first before I can act. I need to feel like there's meaning before I can move. So like I said earlier, I end up looking all the way toward the future, and only after that becomes a big decision. And can I actually start something? I keep saying on this show that life has no meaning, but maybe I don't even need to keep saying that. What I think it might be better for me. People didn't try so hard to find meaning at all, and at that point, it doesn't even matter whether life's meaning actually exists or not. That's because it leads to the same place either way. So maybe repeating that life has no meaning doesn't actually mean much easier. In the first place, I believe that trying to hold onto meanings was rebel toward collapse for me. Unlike Buddhism, this isn't about refusing suffering. It's more about finding a way to keep functioning, and as a result, saying the function is tied to not holding on to meaning. That's the connection I've landed on. By the way, absolute B definition means something unchanged. That's just built on a word. For something changed, it's not longer fixed, so it can't be absolute. And Buddha said, nothing says and changing, meaning he's basically saying there's no such thing as absolute. That made me think it's Husi thinks there's no absolute that make Buddha isn't absolute either. True too. Isn't that paradox? I've thought about this before too. Who you say there's no absolute, then that's what some logic there's no absolute itself can't be absolute either. I already understand that, but that's not the point here. What I was thinking just now applied to daily life too, not an absolute sense. By the way, before this I was using the shonen meaning optional, meaning something like meanings optional. It's fine to have it or not have it, but that never quite felt right to me. No, so I named it that. But what about the meaning of the thing right in front of me? I can't believe that kind of meaning exists on it at all. If we're not thinking about absolute meaning, but meaning of what's right in front of you, that's something you create yourself. It's fine to feel it as meaningful. You feel that way, but that's kind of separate issue. Honestly, for me, saying absolute things, the meaning of life, it's fine either way. It doesn't matter. The meaning is in a search itself, and fine to suffering as a kind of love. That doesn't work for me. I don't think there should be such a thing absolute. Then the meaning of life just a religion. That's where I differ from Buddhism. It's not simply as long as there's not a more suffering, that's fine for me. I get that, but from Buddhism point of view, saying there's no meaning, it's self-fixed position. But something that doesn't exist, that exists like giant or Doraemon or Anpanman, that they don't need to exist, and you don't even need about whether they exist or not, right? But I understand the logic deciding definitively that the self exists or definitely it doesn't exist. Looking at either position leads to suffering. I understand that logic. I live that way to trying not to settle on a fixed conclusion, but going back to what I said earlier, I think the self is made a relationship that's true from Buddhism perspective to it's made a relationship that there's deeper essence underneath that not believing in religions. Honestly, the pretty scary thing to do. Not believing in that, but also driving through life without direction, scary too, and believing in yourself instead basically turns yourself on your own religion. And not many people can have that much confidence in themselves. Maybe only religion founder can, and they're not exactly normal people either, like Doraemon or Anpanman. The ideal meaning in life is absolute. I don't even think you need the concept of existing or not existing for this. It's not that you should live thinking these things don't exist. It's more like you're able to live that way. It's not about existing or not existing. You don't even need that question in first place. It's strange that there's no need for problem. Anpanman simply not existing. I believe there's no absolute, but I don't done that in a belief system. I don't trust it as something to believe in. And I don't lean toward this approach of neither existing nor not existing either, as for essence, I don't want to look at an idea that there's no essence either. But I do think that self made a relationship and it clear that nothing, not people, not anything physical space is some kind of fixed essence underneath. Understand the spirit. Buddhism philosophy don't get fixed anything, but I don't you see the problem with Ampama simply not existing. We are not religion founder, so it's fine to just say something doesn't exist. Religions about absolute with no real basis. A religion founder claims it can run God or fell from the heaven or something like that. Basically, it's belief with no real foundation. After spending 20 years inside the religion and observing it closely, I've come to the firm conclusion that there's no such thing as absolute, and also that I shouldn't fix myself and anything that actually pretty frightening itself, because I don't fix and anything can't become a fixed belief either. So I don't hold it as a fixed ideology. I actually lived it out practice following reality as it comes, more like a loose approach, something I hold and as a belief or ideology. That's how I done it. If I turn it and a fixed ideology, I'd run in a same contradiction again. But when it comes to absolute, it seems like thinking of it as neither existing nor not existing. Avoid contradiction better.